coming to you from the movie room. Of course, it's Thanksgiving Day the whole time I'm recording this. Of course, a lot of families aren't able to meet because of this COVID thing, and a lot of people are quarantining and just staying social distancing. And so I thought I'd come on here and not necessarily do a K-Dog Goes to the Movies, but I thought I'll do a little add-on to what I was doing with the K-Dog Goes to the Movies, and just did a series of some films that were my childhood favorites. And I thought I would show off what I have of my childhood favorites on DVD, Blu-ray, and so on and so forth, and just a little collection video rather than just sitting watching the movie, because I think people are just kind of bored to death in front of being in front of a television set. But if you're on YouTube here, it's about the same thing, but still, I'm going to do it anyway. Why? Because I enjoy doing this, and it's fun for me. But yeah, these are listed alphabetically. These are some of my childhood favorites, maybe all of them, I don't know. There's quite a big stack here of DVDs and Blu-rays. But yeah, and I may talk a little bit about them, but just know there's a lot of movies here. So yeah, we'll go right into it. First one is a film from the 1950s, but I grew up watching it because it was a Disney film, and it was re-released quite regularly. Matter of fact, during my childhood, it saw a theatrical re-release and a home video release. And it is the original 101 Dalmatians. Yeah, from, I believe, 1951 was the original release of the film, and was quite pioneering in a way for Disney animation. Or actually animation in general, because it came up with what is known as the Xerox process. And to be honest, Walt Disney was not a fan of it. As a matter of fact, a lot of animation people are not a fan of it, but a lot of people who were in animation, they liked it because they didn't have to duplicate so much, do so many drawings. They just did maybe a couple drawings and then put it into this machine, and it would do the whole thing. Next up is from 1993. This, of course, is the Ultra 4K HD version, and I watched this one quite a bit when it came out. Wait, 1993? I think it's 1992. I'm sorry. Time goes by when you're having fun, I guess. And it is Walt Disney's Aladdin. Yeah, from the early 90s. This was the most successful movie that Disney Animation had done up to that point. 1992, yeah. So yeah, Aladdin. Next one is one I drove my parents crazy with. Drove other family members crazy with. And it was from an ex-Disney animator who broke out on his own. And it's Don Bluth's All Dogs Go to Heaven from 1989. Yeah, drove my family crazy with this movie. Yeah, it's hard to believe that all the people that were voice cast in that, pretty much most of them, are dead now. Like, you have Burt Reynolds, I think Lonnie Anderson's still alive, I'm not sure. Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, they're gone. Charles Nelson Riley's gone. Judith Barcy was killed when this film was in production. Yeah, yeah. Most of them are dead now, unfortunately. And so they may have gone to heaven. The next two are American Tail, also from Don Bluth, this was his first collaboration with Steven Spielberg. He made American Tail. And then the next film was without Don Bluth, but Spielberg wanted to keep it going. And it's An American Tail, Fievel Goes West. Watched both of those movies quite often. I think I watched Fievel Goes West a little bit more because we actually owned a copy of that on VHS. An American Tail we rented quite a bit, and it was years later I would finally own a copy of that. Next up is a Disney film from 1994. Came out the same year as The Lion King. And we watched this movie quite a bit when it came out on video. I actually saw this in the theater. The rest of my family did not. They saw it on home video. And once I showed it to them on home video, they enjoyed the heck out of it. And they thought it was a very touching story. I'm talking about Disney's version of Angels in the Outfield. Now, I say Disney's version because this is based on another film from the 1940s, I believe. Yeah, and also titled Angels in the Outfield. I enjoyed this one, even though it was criticized at the time for being a remake and that it was not original, and they thought it was unnecessary. Kind of the thing that we hear now with a lot of sequels and remakes, but yeah. This is one I rented quite a bit and watched at other people's houses, watched it in school, and I'm not big in musicals, but I do like some of them. And you can't deny Annie from 1982. Yeah, classic movie. And they keep remaking this. It seems like every 10 years this movie has to be remade, and it fails every time. The original is the best one. This is another one I used to watch regularly. Had a great aunt that bought me the video of this years and years ago, and it's really not a kids movie, but it's one I watched quite often when I was a kid. This predated Jurassic Park for me because it had full-fleshed dinosaurs walking into it, and yeah, they're big animatronic, done by animatronics, but it was what they had at the time. And I think it's from 1985, I believe. And the film is called Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend. And the story is about this young couple. They are living in Africa at the time. They are studying Sean Young and William Catt. Sean Young is studying some archaeology, and she's doing some like archaeological research, and she finds a dinosaur fossil, and it appears to be a recent fossil. And so they go into, after getting stranded into the African jungle, they discover that these dinosaurs are indeed real, and that they are still walking the planet. They've managed to survive 65 million years of extinction. So, yeah, and it was always, and it's got some action into it. I mean, there's bad guys, there's good guys, and yeah, it's a real adventure movie. Next up, also from 1994, rented this quite often when it came out on video. I did not get to see it in the theater. Wasn't really interested in seeing it in the theater for some reason, but it's a movie that our family has enjoyed several times, and it's basically Home Alone with a baby. Matter of fact, it's even produced by John Hughes, 1990s John Hughes, 1994, and it's Baby's Day Out. And the stars in the film are Joe Mantegna, Laura Flynn Boyle, Joe Pantoliano. And so, yeah, it's basically, like I said before, Home Alone with a baby, and going through the streets of Chicago and different areas and construction sites, and of course the baby is not setting up any booby traps. The criminals just happen to walk into dangerous situations. Swig of a tasty beverage here. Next up is, I'm just going to say all of them, the Back to the Future trilogy. I rented them all at various different, over and over, and various ones at different times, and it depended on which mood I was in to watch which one. But yeah, the Back to the Future trilogy, you know, Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis. This next movie was my first movie I ever saw in a movie theater, and it still holds a special place in my movies. It's not necessarily one of my favorite movies, but I put it on this list because it was my first movie I ever saw in a movie theater. It is Walt Disney's Bambi. Now, the story was behind the reason why it was my first is because my mother was pregnant with my brother at the time. This was the summer of 1988. And at the time, Disney was re-releasing a lot of their movies back into the theater, giving them updated transfers and putting them in stereo sound if they hadn't been in before. And so my mother was pregnant with my brother at the time, and it was an extremely hot summer, and they needed to go someplace where they could cool off. And so where do you go but to the movies? And so we went in to see Walt Disney's Bambi, and I haven't been the same since. The next movie is from 1991. I did see this one in the theater when it originally played. And it's one of the greatest animated films of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And it is Beauty and the Beast. Yeah, this is the Ultra 4K HD version. I'll probably own every single version that they come out with this, but yeah, this is the Disney animated film. And this next one also saw in the theater, same year. And for a long time I was terrified to death to go into movie theaters. I don't know why. Between the ages of 5 and 7, I was terrified to death to go into movie theaters. And it was this movie that changed my opinion and got me to go regularly to the movies. And you're probably going to laugh at this, and I don't care. We enjoyed the heck out of this movie. We rented it multiple times after seeing it in the theater. And of course, I'm talking about 1991's Beethoven. Yeah. Actually, I think it was 92 when it was released, but the copyright says 91, so that's why I'm reading. But yeah, Beethoven. Charles Grodin, Bonnie Hunt, Dean Jones, Oliver Platt, Stanley Tucci. Yeah, produced by Ivan Reitman. And rumor is that John Hughes wrote it under his pseudonym Edmond Dantes. But a lot of writers, a lot of screenwriters will do that if they're not proud of a project. And I think that was one of John Hughes's movies that he wasn't very proud of. He did it for hire, and just somebody had to write it, but he didn't want to put his name on it. The next one is one that I rented when I was a real little kid multiple times, just because it had cute and cuddly animals in it. And we did this as a K-Dog Goes to the Movies, and it is Benji the Hunted. Yeah, I finally got a DVD copy of it. Of course, when we did the K-Dog Goes to the Movies, I had a VHS copy. I watched it off a VHS copy, and still have the tape here somewhere, but yeah. But I finally got me a DVD copy of it. Unfortunately, the transfer isn't any better. It's a full screen transfer. Anyway, this movie, me and my brother always laughed ourselves silly at it. And matter of fact, the first time I watched it straight through was with my cousins in Ohio. And we watched it multiple times there, and we just thought this movie was hilarious. But at the time, it was critically panned for being a bad adaptation of a TV show, and they just thought it was so stupid. But we loved it as a movie, and I'm talking about 1993's The Beverly Hillbillies movie with Jim Varney, Cloris Leachman, Erica Eleniak, and Dietrich Spader as the Clampetts here. And we always laughed ourselves silly at this film. And it even has Dabney Coleman and Lily Tomlin in the film, being Miss Hathaway and Mr. Drysdale, and kind of reuniting them with 9 to 5 cast. Even Dolly Parton makes an appearance in the film. So yeah, we always thought that movie was fun and funny. And the only thing that we didn't really care for, at least my dad didn't care for, was the scene when they're on the expressway and they're flipping everybody off. They think it's done so innocently that they don't realize what they're saying. But anyway, the next film. Now, this film was around here, did not come to the theater. It was a straight-to-video release back in the early 90s. But once we saw it in the video store, we rented it multiple times. Because it was we thought it was so epic for storytelling, and yeah, it's The Brave Little Toaster. And this was at a time, this was actually made by the Disney animation team when they were going through their slump in the late 80s. They were looking for work, and so they decided to do this test project to where, let's make a movie of our own and see if we can actually tell the story. And so they got a hold of this story called The Brave Little Toaster. And they found an independent distributor to release the film, and the film was quite successful, even though it only played in a limited run, but it went straight to DVD, or not DVD, but home video at the time. And Disney picked it up on home video, and it became a classic. And so, yeah, The Brave Little Toaster. Who'd have thought you can make household appliances have a story and character and all that? Next up, I watched this one. The first time I ever saw this was in school. in second grade, we had actually read the book. And so our teacher thought it would be a good idea, since we read the book, let's watch the movie. And Hanna-Barbera produced this in 1972. It was released in 73. And it has an all-star cast of voices, including the late Debbie Reynolds as Charlotte. Henry Gibson is Wilbur. Paul Lynde as Templeton. Agnes Moorehead as the Goose. Yeah, and it's Charlotte's Web. Yeah, it's a classic animated film. They later did a live-action movie with Dakota Fanning. I have never seen that film because I thought this one was perfect enough for me. It even has music by the Sherman Brothers. If you don't know who the Sherman Brothers is, they were Walt Disney's longtime collaborators and songwriters. I think they were. Yeah. The Sherman Brothers did the music. I thought, wait a minute, I better check on that. And yeah, the Sherman Brothers worked on the songs for that film. They were Walt Disney's right-hand song guys. So all the songs from Mary Poppins and all the classic Disney songs, you know, you can thank the Sherman Brothers. So next up is another one I rented quite a bit because I used to watch the Saturday morning cartoon version of this. It's the Chipmunk Adventure. Yeah, so because I used to watch Alvin and the Chipmunks, the cartoon series, when I was a little kid, and when they made a movie, it was a big deal, and so I rented the Chipmunk Adventure quite often. Here's another one I rented quite often and saw on home video many times. Again, because I watched the cartoon series, was a big fan of the show, and it's DuckTales the movie, Treasure of the Lost Lamp. And of course, this version I have is from the Disney Movie Club. I got this a long time ago. They have since made this film available to the public through in box stores and not just the Disney Movie Club. Next one, watched multiple times, even owned the VHS years and years ago, and it is Walt Disney's Dumbo. And it just bugs me that they want to censor the one scene in the film with the crows. Yeah, I understand that it's not politically correct, but it's crucial to the story because the crows are the ones who help discover that Dumbo can fly. Next one is my all-time favorite movie. Matter of fact, you've seen in the movie room here that I have multiple objects pertaining to this movie. E.T. the Extraterrestrial on the Ultra 4K edition here. I also own it on DVD a couple times, VHS a couple times, and so yeah. Now the next two, they go together because we rented these movies with this guy all the time, and I think towards the later years we didn't watch as many because the ones that went directly to video weren't as good as these, what I'm about to show here, because these were the theatrical releases. These were the best ones. Of course, every Christmas time you need to watch this one, and it is Ernest Saves Christmas from 1988. And then I got the triple pack here with Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Scared Stupid, and Ernest Goes to Jail throughout various years. Now these were all released by Disney under their Touchstone label. So yeah, we got Ernest Saves Christmas and the other 4 films that Disney released. Now if you want to go in order that they were released, it was Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Jail, and Ernest Scared Stupid, in that order. So yeah. Now this next one, I saw when I saw it when it first came out, at least to video. But I didn't really get it until years later when I was around, I'm thinking around 9 or 10 years old. And I'm thinking around 10. And I rewatched it, and matter of fact, I kept rewatching it, and rewatching it, and rewatching it, and it's so good. Because when I was around 10, I finally got it, and it was Kevin Costner in Field of Dreams. And of course, every baseball season, they like to reference James Earl Jones' speech in this film, the "People Will Come" speech. And of course, we all know the famous phrase, "If you build it, he will come." But yeah, and of course, James Earl Jones' speech that he gives, the monologue that he gives about the "People Will Come" speech, is just so epic, and it gets you so excited, even though very little happens. It's just, it's, yeah, it's at the, Kevin Costner's character is at a point where, because he's built this baseball diamond in the middle of his cornfield, he's facing bankruptcy. And so, does he pursue his dream, or does he cave in and foreclose on his house? You know, yeah, it's just a great movie. There's so much morals in there, and plus it's got this father and son story that's layered underneath of it. It's so brilliant, and it's about reconciliation with your father, you know. Now this next one, this is another television to film adaptation. Saw this in the theater in 1994, and we enjoyed the heck out of it. We were kids, and this was a big budget movie for the time. Even though it was not very successful, it was really hit on by the critics. But we had fun with it as kids and saw it in the theater. And I'm talking about The Flintstones, starring John Goodman, Rick Moranis, Rosie O'Donnell, and Elizabeth Perkins as the Flintstones and the Rubbles. And you know, Rosie O'Donnell can still do that laugh, and so, yeah. Next up, we did this as a K-Dog Goes to the Movies. I do have something to say about it because the actor in this film later got into some trouble, and I made the comment that he's spending time in jail. Well, apparently he is not in jail. Matter of fact, they've done somebody has done a documentary about the actor and his life's post this movie, and it's Disney's Flight of the Navigator. Yeah, from 1986. Yeah, and of course I watched this movie quite often when I was a kid, a little kid, rented it quite often. So yeah. Next up, didn't get to see this one until the mid-90s, actually, when Disney finally decided to put this movie out on home video after a long hiatus after its theatrical run, because there was a little bit of turmoil going on behind the scenes. And I'll explain it in a minute. And it's Disney's Fox and the Hound from 1980. Now you got to think at the time, I mentioned before an animator by the name of Don Bluth. Well, Don Bluth was in the middle of production on Fox and the Hound, and the whole Disney staff was animating that film. And Don Bluth was one of the supervising animators. And Don Bluth was not happy with the way things were going at the studio. And so, on his 40th, I think it was 40th birthday or 42nd birthday, I forget which, in 1979, he packed up his things, took 1/3 of the animation staff with him, and they went to form their own animation studio. And that caused the animation studio at Disney to delay that film by 6 months. Because there was a lot of turmoil going on between animators and the staff at the Walt Disney Productions Company. Bluth leaving, and the product was not up to par. So, yeah, Fox and the Hound got delayed for 6 months and came out in 1980. And it did okay for what it was at the time, but then Disney just couldn't do anything right. And so it was like Disney was almost ashamed to put that out. Home video was a brand new thing, and not every studio had caught on to it. And so Disney was hesitant about putting their content out on home video. And so when finally they did, it was in the mid-90s, and it was for a limited time. And so, yeah, Fox and the Hound did not receive a release until around 1994. 1995. Matter of fact, I think it even had a trailer for The Lion King on it. And so, it was probably around 1994 when it came out. Now, the next two are in this one pack. And it is Ghostbusters. Yeah. Watched this one a little bit. I didn't watch it too many times as some of the other movies I have in these piles, because again, this had, for a little kid, this had some scary stuff in it. And some of the ghost sequences were pretty scary, but looking back on it years later, you see the comedy. It was scary and laughable at the same time. Next up was a movie that came out in the mid-90s. And was just a fun movie to watch. We rented it multiple times just because we liked it, and it was a goofy movie. Yeah. And plus, at the time, Goofy had his own cartoon show called Goof Troop. And so it kind of tied into what was going on with Goof Troop. Even though Max, his son, is a little bit older in the movie than he is on the TV show. So, yeah. The next one's also from Disney. It was originally released in 1986, but Disney brought it back out to theaters in 1991 and to home video, and it's The Great Mouse Detective. We always had a ball with this one and watching it, and we just loved it. Now, next up, I remember watching this when I was a real little kid. But again, I didn't realize, some of the jokes, because even though it was a PG-rated movie, it does have quite a bit of adult content and language in it. But it's another film from John Hughes, and it's John Candy, Dan Aykroyd in The Great Outdoors. Yeah, a funny movie. Yeah, with especially the bear sequence, and when John Candy eats the big steak. Yeah. Now this one came around when I was the age of 10 and watched it quite a bit. This is a Disney movie that definitely had some crude humor in it, but how do I want to say it? I thought it was very slapsticky and had a little bit more of an edge to it than some of the other films and comedies I was watching. But it's Heavyweights from, I think, 1994, 1995, and stars Ben Stiller from, yeah, we now know who Ben Stiller is, but at the time he wasn't that big of a star. He was in other movies, but like, smaller parts. And I think when you watch this movie and then watch Dodgeball, his Tony Perkis is very, very similar to White Goodman. It's basically the same character, just one's held back a little bit more because it's Disney, and so he can't cuss as many times, and so yeah. Now this is one we rented quite a bit and then stopped because we liked it, but it was kind of dark of a film. Well, not kind of. It is a dark film. I mean, it's dealing with, just pure evil, but yeah, it's Hocus Pocus. Now this is the Best Buy exclusive Ultra 4K version, but it still had some very funny moments and some, yeah, kind of fantasy-like movies. Originally, Steven Spielberg was slated to direct that movie, and but he turned it down because it was a Disney property, and he said, "I'm a competitor at Disney. I don't want to be making movies with them," at the time. But he did. The next two are classics. Yeah, it's Home Alone and Home Alone 2. Rented Home Alone, the first one, many times, and then actually owned a copy of Home Alone 2 on VHS, and you could essentially say that Home Alone 2 is the first movie remade, just set in a different house, but we always laughed ourselves silly at Marv and Harry every time they walk into a booby trap and burn their hand or burn their hair catches on fire or something. Now this next one, I'm actually gonna just talk about the top half because this is a 2-pack DVD. We saw this one in the theater when it originally played. Matter of fact, the film broke when we went to see it, but we were able to watch the rest of the movie and enjoy it. There was no need for the theater to refund our money, let's just say that. And it was Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey, Disney flick from the early 90s with, who was it? Don Amici voices the Golden Retriever, Sally Field voices the cat, and Michael J. Fox voices the bulldog. And yeah, and the second movie we didn't see, and we just rented it when it came out to video, and didn't care for that one as much, but the first one, it was definitely really good stuff, and some of the dialogue that was given to the voices is hilarious. I mean, between Sally Field and Michael J. Fox being, giving comedy what it is. Like, for example, there's a scene where they're in the middle of the forest and they're sleeping. The dogs and cats are trying to get some sleep, and the bulldog's scared because he's hearing all strange noises in the forest, and the golden retriever says something like, "It's probably a moose." And they said, "Well, mooses can't climb trees, but they can reach right up to the top, and you'll be safer and tells the cat, "You'll be safer on the ground with us." And she's like, "Me? Sleep in the dirt?" And then finally it fades into the next day, and the cat's on the ground with the dogs, in between the dogs, and the Michael J. Fox, as the bulldog, says, "Well, look who's down the dirt with the dogs." And then he goes, "Morning, honey," and licks the cat's mouth. "Morning, honey." Yeah. Alright, so the next two, we're going to move along. It's, I saw this one in the theater, kids, when it originally played. 1989 is when this blockbuster hit, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And it was Rick Moranis and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids from 1989. Then a few years later, out comes the sequel, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, which is, I'm trying to think when this came out. I think it was 92, 93 when this one came out, and it's, of course, Mr. Selinsky is at it again and building a new machine. Actually, it didn't involve a new machine. It involved a machine at a laboratory, not at a machine that he was building. But, yeah. And it leads to the baby attacking Las Vegas. I almost said Los Angeles. Las Vegas. And, yeah. But, yeah, it was... Didn't see that one in the theater, but rented it quite a bit and saw it on TV, and yeah. Same with this one, and it's Steven Spielberg's Hook. Yeah, not one of Spielberg's favorites. Matter of fact, Spielberg himself has said that he was disappointed in the outcome of this movie. But yeah, but it's still a favorite among people, and myself, I still kind of go back to it every now and again. Of course, with the late Robin Williams playing Peter Pan. Of course, we all know originally it was supposed to be Michael Jackson, and there was a whole brouhaha between Michael Jackson and Steven Spielberg at the time. So, and the next one up is probably the picture on this DVD would sum it up what happened with this movie. And it's Howard the Duck. Yeah, it laid an egg, that's for sure. Yeah. I was with my cousins in Ohio when I mainly watched that one. And it was not a good movie, but for some reason we enjoyed the heck out of that movie and thought some of it was funny and witty. Now the next two movies, mostly when I was in middle school, late elementary school, early middle school, I would rent these and watch these movies quite a bit, and it's The Adventures of Tom and Huck, starring Elijah Wood, and Tom and Huck, starring Jonathan Taylor Thomas and Brad Renfro. And yeah, I rented these a little bit. Of course, The Adventures of Tom and Huck is based on, or Adventures of Huck Finn, excuse me. The Adventures of Huck Finn, based on the Mark Twain novel of the same title, and Tom and Huck was based on The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Because, because Huckleberry Finn is also a part of Tom Sawyer's story. But yeah, I haven't watched these in quite some time. Yeah, these movies I think were a lot of fun for the time. But yeah. Now the next one, saw this one in the theater. Watched it quite a bit on VHS, and it was Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame. And I thought at the time it was a really good follow-up. It kind of went back to what they were doing with Beauty and the Beast, I thought, but it wasn't as popular with people as, let's say, Beauty and the Beast was. But it was a part of that Disney Renaissance period where it was still a box office hit, and Disney was just hitting home run after home run, and they could do no wrong at that point. And this next one is The Indian in the Cupboard. Now, this one, we did not watch the movie. I watched the movie quite a bit, but I remember reading the book in school. And matter of fact, I read it twice. I think I read it once in 4th grade, and then I read it again in 5th grade. And yeah, and of course, this movie was made by Frank Oz from the Muppets fame, and also the screenplay is by Melissa Matheson, and produced by Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall. Basically, the people behind E.T. were involved with this, and so, and I remember reading the book when I was in 4th and 5th grade, and they did a lot. Melissa Matheson did a lot of things to the script, because when you read the book, if I remember correctly, the Indian spoke in very, very broken English. In the film, he speaks normal. And so, yeah, it just shows how much of a change there is. Now, this is actually a box set, but it's the Indiana Jones Adventures. Yeah, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Temple of Doom, and the Last Crusade. And it also has Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in here as well. But these are classic movies. We watch these all the time. Matter of fact, I had an uncle that had HBO at the time, and so he had all the movies taped off HBO. That was before Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was even thought of, and so yeah. Classic adventure movies. The next one I rented quite a bit. It's not that great of a movie. It was a late 80s, early 90s cash grab. And it's Jetsons the movie. Of course, I watched the Jetsons on TV. I watched the Jetsons on TV. I watched the Flintstones on TV. And unfortunately, I don't know what it was about the movies I enjoyed. I just think maybe it was because it was a bigger plot for television. being the fact that it was supposed to go to the movies, and yeah, I don't know what it was. Next up, saw this one in the theater, and I really enjoyed it at the time, even though it was critically panned, big time. Matter of fact, it's still made fun of. Mainly Arnold's line when he says, "Put that cookie down." Jingle all the way. Yes. Mainly saw it because it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it was from the people that made Home Alone. It was not John Hughes, but it was Chris Columbus as producer. It was directed by Brian Levant, who directed the Flintstones, and of course stars Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sinbad, and it also has Tom Hanks' wife Rita Wilson in here, and Jim Belushi. It was a funny movie for us at the time, you know, even though it was panned badly. And then the next one watched quite often because it was just a huge. You gotta understand that special effects movies were really huge at the time, mainly after stuff like Jurassic Park. You know, studios were looking to do okay, we now have this technology, but let's pull off some of those scripts we weren't able to do from years ago. And so here is Robin Williams in Jumanji. Yeah, directed by Joe Johnston, who would go on to do the Captain America movie. Yeah, he also did The Rocketeer. Yeah, it was just a fun movie to watch, and of course we always laughed at that one scene of the stampede. You have that one little rhino at the end that's kind of huffing and puffing because it can't keep up. Now this is one I rented quite a bit. Because also this was another case where they had a cartoon show out using characters from this movie. And the movie is The Jungle Book. The cartoon at the time that was using characters from this was Tailspin, and I was a big fan of the show Tailspin. And in this you have Louie and Baloo. And of course, has very famous song in here, The Bare Necessities, I Want to Be Like You, some of the other, you know, some of those other songs, and we just always loved watching this. This was a huge hit from back in the 1960s, and unfortunately it's the last movie that Walt Disney supervised before he died. Next up we have, I'm just going to name the whole series, but we have Jurassic Park. Yeah. Even though the movie was rated PG-13, I watched it quite regularly when I was a kid, when it came out on VHS, and it was, my grandmother tried to talk my dad out of to not letting us watch it because my cousins had already seen it in the movie theater. She's like, "Don't take them to see that. It's got dinosaurs eating people," and like it was the scariest freaking thing that was ever made. But of course I saw it, watched it, loved it, still do. Yeah. And also, speaking of Steven Spielberg and dinosaurs, here is The Land Before Time, a movie that I saw when I was quite a small child on VHS. Rented it over and over again. And it's probably one of the shortest movies ever made, too. It's only 69 minutes in length. I guess it was supposed to be longer, but there was a sequence that needed to be cut out because it was going to give the film a PG rating, and Steven Spielberg was not in the mood of producing a fully animated PG cartoon at the time, which was kind of taboo. You just didn't do that. And the next up is 1994's The Lion King. Yeah, saw this one in the theaters, kids. Matter of fact, I saw it twice in the theater, and once, the first time for its original release, and the second time was when they brought it out in 3D. Yeah, and of course, the movie still holds up, and it has, I think it was considered at the time the greatest animated movie of all time. Because it beat out Aladdin, it beat out The Beauty and the Beast. So, yeah, The Lion King. And this next one is probably one of my personal favorites. I did not get to see this one in the theater. I don't know why. I just, well, it was probably in that period where I was scared to go into movie theaters. But, yeah, it's Disney's The Little Mermaid. But it has since become one of my favorite go-to animated movies, because this was the one that kind of put Disney animation back on the map, because Disney was, you know, in the middle of a bad slump at the time, and it took a series of movies to get Disney animation back on track. And all three of those movies are in this stash here. And The Little Mermaid was like the last one to say, okay, oh, Disney animation. Oh, this is really good, you know. Here's another one that was a VHS favorite of ours. The Little Rascals. Of course, we did a Kdog'S to the movies with Little Rascals here. And, yeah, watched this one quite often. As a matter of fact, that following year, I ended up being in 4-H and raising rabbits, and so all my rabbits were named after characters in the Little Rascals. Okay, this next one I need to do some explaining, because this movie is a horrible movie. It's a terrible movie. Actually did a kind of a Mystery Science Theater 3000 take on this movie, where we sat and watched the whole movie, and me and my brother just riff on it. I had to take it off YouTube because of copyright purposes, because Shout Factory had picked up the home video rights, and they were not keen on and MGM was not keen on me doing this, so I took it down. And it's macking me. Yes, I did rent this movie quite a bit when I was a wee lad. But, even though it's a blatant ripoff of E.T., even down to the title. Originally, one of the tentative titles for E.T. was going to be E.T. and Me. It wasn't used. So guess what they did? MAC, short for Mysterious Alien Creature and Me. Yeah, and of course, Mac here on the back cover is photoshopped a little bit. Yeah, this little pointy ear. Of course, the Macs cannot smile. Matter of fact, their lips are like this throughout the entire film. They don't smile. They do not speak. All they do is whistle. And they have, their lips are constantly like, and they move around like this. Like they're drunk. And not only do you have the little baby alien, you have a whole family of them. And one of them is around 6.5 feet tall, the father, and he's creepy. Yeah. Now, this next one I saw mostly on television. It was taped off television, and even though it's a film, it was a short film. It did play in the theater above, I think, a re-release of The Rescuers in 1983. It is Mickey's Christmas Carol. Yeah, and this was the film that introduced Scrooge McDuck. But they just call him Scrooge in this. Ebenezer Scrooge. And so they play it out like the Christmas Carol. Now, the next three, continuing on with the Christmas Carol, I also have The Muppet Christmas Carol, which was also released by Disney. And I think in 1993 is when this came out. With Michael Caine playing Scrooge. You have Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy as Mr. and Mrs. Cratchit. Gonzo actually plays Charles Dickens. And Rizzo plays himself. And Statler and Waldorf played the Marley brothers. And Fozzie is Mr. Fuzzywig. Mr. Fozziewig, actually. And I better grab this last one. But the rest of these are the straight-up Muppet movies. And, of course, I watched all of these multiple times, rented them multiple times. We have Muppet Treasure Island, which was actually released by Disney, and then the Great Muppet Caper, which was from the early 80s, I think in 79, 80, with Jim Henson directing it, actually, the Great Muppet Caper. And then there's the original, The Muppet Movie. Yeah, the one that started all the Muppets in the movies. And then there's Muppets Take Manhattan. Now this is the only one, this one and Muppets from Space are the only two that Disney will not get a hold of. Because they were actually Sony Pictures releases. As a matter of fact, this one was released by TriStar from 1982. Or 84, I'm sorry. Yeah, Muppets Take Manhattan. And then there's The Never-Ending Story. And The Never-Ending Story 2, the next chapter. Rented these movies quite a bit. We always enjoyed the Never-Ending Story movies. And unfortunately, this was one of those movies that was also supposed to be remade, but never. It was eventually dropped because the owner of the rights would not sell it to him. It was supposed to be produced by Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall and Leonardo DiCaprio, but they just couldn't get it done. This next one, my Dad was mostly the one that turned me onto this because he loves westerns. He loves dogs. And me, I was a big Disney guy. So he knew this one. Old Yeller. And this also has Savage Sam, the sequel. But yeah, of course, it was sad to see the final end of the film. Yeah. The next one I did see in the theater, and this was one of those that helped launch the Disney Renaissance back into, the Disney animation back into a Renaissance form, and it's Oliver and Company. Now, if you watch this movie today, it doesn't hold up at all. It's very 80s, very 80s, particularly in its depiction of New York City. Very 80s, trust me. Next up is one that we always watch during Christmas time. Matter of fact, I did a Kdog'S to the movies last year with this film. And it's One Magic Christmas, also by Disney. You see, I've got a lot of Disney in here. What's wrong with me? But yeah, One Magic Christmas. Mary Steenburgen and what's his name? What is it? Harry Dean Stanton. Yeah. This one we saw in the theater in 1995, I believe. Yeah, Danny Glover, Ray Liotta, Dennis Leary, and Operation Dumbo Drop. Based on a true story that took place in Vietnam during the Vietnam War in 1968. And of course, I saw this one in the theater during a re-release in 1993. And it's Walt Disney's Pinocchio. And of course, owned the VHS and watched that multiple times. And then this is another holiday movie that we watch about every year. Prancer, the original, not the sequel. But yeah, this one with Sam Elliott, Cloris Leachman. And this one was technically my first movie I ever owned on VHS, and I always loved watching this movie. And it was not a big hit for Disney, but it was a modest hit for them in the 70s, and it's their version of Robin Hood. And it was just a fun movie for me as a kid. And when the Santa Claus came out, this is the next one, the Santa Claus, we couldn't stop playing it. We played it through the new year. And matter of fact, all through the next year when it came out on video. And it's just, yeah, it was just a huge, I mean, we just loved that movie. This is another one. Somebody had taped it off HBO for us. I can't remember who. But when I was a kid, we had a copy of this movie, and then we lost it somehow. And then eventually we found a video store that had it on available to rent, and we rented it multiple times. And that's Short Circuit. Did a Kdog'S to the movies on this one too. Yeah, Short Circuit. Man, so quotable too. You know, number 5 is alive. this next one, when it came out on home video in 1994, it was we had to watch. We watched it multiple times just to say, that this was the first full-length animated feature film, and it was really we really watched it more for technical reasons, but then we started getting into the story, and it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Yeah, and it just boggled us as kids' mind, because that's what Disney advertised it as. And of course it was, at the time, the first full-length animated feature film. And how long is it? It's like 84 minutes. And to think, at a time in the movies, that was a big deal. And so every time we watched it, we go, that was the first full-length animated feature. It wasn't the first animated feature, first animated cartoon, no. But it was the first one that was the length of a movie. And so, yeah. And of course, this one is not the best, and we've got a sequel coming out as soon as COVID lifts. And it's Space Jam. The sequel will be with LeBron James, though. But yeah, Space Jam. Michael Jordan, Bugs Bunny. This movie does not have that great of a story behind it, but the special effects that were involved at the time were amazing. That's mainly what we watched it for, was, because it was taking the tricks that was completed for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but did it on a updated scale. And so it was also combining those effects to the human actors too. And the next up, I had to throw this one in because I watched the original Star Wars trilogy when I was a kid multiple times. Saw it multiple times as the original cut, but unfortunately I had to, little did I know that I would have to commit that to memory, because they would be altered many, many times, and they are not going to be going back to those cuts at all. As a matter of fact, George Lucas himself has made sure that nobody sees the original cuts to the Star Wars trilogy. I think he's burned them. And because the Library of Congress, which always talks about, which is all about film preservation, and it has the films that will always be preserved, Star Wars will be preserved, all right, but it will be the new digitized versions, unfortunately. Now, next up, because at the time, I was big into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so when we found out, when we were kids, that a live-action adaptation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was coming to the screen, we all went crackers. And I'm talking about, yeah, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. 1, 2, and 3. Even though we prefer these two over this one. Even that one. But yeah. It's the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies, where they used real people, stunt people, in suits. Yeah. And this one I watched multiple times when I was a kid. And this is a movie you wouldn't even think I would be watching as a kid. But I watched it, loved it, fell in love with it as soon as I saw it on television. And it was Easter Sunday when they played it. And it was the Ten Commandments. Yeah, Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments. I remember renting it and just thought, this movie is so long, but it's so good. It's just, it is the epitome of what an epic film should be. There you go. Next up, Toy Story. The original. Even saw this one in the theater, kids. And as a matter of fact, it's the 25th anniversary of it. Yeah, 25 years ago, Thanksgiving weekend, I was sitting in a movie theater in Muncie, Indiana, watching Toy Story for the first time. And it blew our minds. Yeah, and of course rewatched it when it came out on home video multiple times. Saw the sequels multiple times. Yeah, Toy Story. Now this one, rented it a bunch of times. We thought it had a decent story and some good animation. Doesn't exactly hold up as well as some of the other films. But this was a film produced by Steven Spielberg called We're Back, A Dinosaur Story. It came out shortly after Jurassic Park. I think it came out the same year, but shortly after. As a matter of fact, there's a little bit of a homage to Jurassic Park in the film. And next is also a Steven Spielberg production with Robert Zemeckis directing. Actually used to own this on VHS, an original VHS copy. And it is Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Yeah, from 1987, but on the original video when it came out in the late 80s. And watched it multiple times, so much so that the tape broke. So, yeah. Now this is one that my parents could not stand, but me and my brother and a lot of my cousins enjoyed watching. And watched it on VHS several times. Watched it on television. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah, there you go, with good old Gene Wilder there. I believe they light that furnace every other day, so there's a good possibility that they'll survive. And last but certainly not least, a movie that millions of people have watched all over the world many, many times throughout its 80 years, at least, and it's The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, of course, a timeless movie. It will always be preserved. That's another one that's in the Library of Congress under the National Film Treasury, where it will always see a re-release eventually. And of course, we all know that story. Very timeless movie. So, those are my childhood favorites. I just thought I'd do a collection video of all the movies I used to watch many times over when I was a child. And some of my favorites that I would go to when I wanted to watch a movie. And so there you go. So from me to you, see you later.